listeners. The living room down the block. You'll be where? Okay, we'll be there. Who are we? We're the movement that will beat Donald Trump. Welcome. We're going to have to sweat for it. We're going to have to sacrifice and fight. We're going to have to lead. Everyone is going to have to lead with kindness, humility, empathy, and not just talk, but action. Action today, action tomorrow. Action until we win. And we will win if we do this together. It's who we are. It's who we always have been. Now let's show them.
Thank you for joining this Biden-Harris campaign National AAPIs for Biden weekly call and AAPIs Assemble phone bank. And now, please welcome AAPI Vote Director Amit Jani.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us for our National Asian American Pacific Islander program today. With 41 days left to go until Election Day, there's so much work left to be done. So many calls, texts left to make to our fellow AAPI community members across battleground states and throughout the country. That is why your participation here today is all the more meaningful, because with your help, the AAPI community can be the margin of victory this election cycle. 2016 has shown us the consequences that elections have and why choosing the right leader for our nation is literally a matter of life and death, as we've seen. That is why tonight, as we reflect on the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think of all that she has provided to bring us to the point of progress we are today for women, for working class, and the AAPI community as a whole. A point of progress where we have the first Black and AAPI member of the community on our ticket as the next Vice President of the United States and Senator Kamala Harris. Someone that first-generation immigrants like my mother, who herself immigrated from India with me at the age of 1, sees in her story. Someone in Senator Harris who knows the challenges that our AAPI community faces and is willing to fight and advocate for all of us. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our great list of speakers today who know Senator Harris and Justice Ginsburg very well. And we're going to talk about what's at stake come this November. So our first speaker, Karen Narasaki, is a national authority on voting rights and redistricting, census, media diversity, immigration, and race relations. Karen was the president and executive director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice, or AAJC, where she helped to lead a successful effort to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act, defend federal affirmative action programs, expand federal hate crime laws, reduce the undercount of minorities in the decennial census, increase minorities on television, and defend family immigration. With that, I would like to introduce Karen Narasaki.
Thank you, Amit. The passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has increased the focus on the courts and civil rights in this election. It is just one of the many reasons why I'm a strong supporter of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to lead our country. I've worked with many presidents, both Republican and Democrat, and the Trump administration is the most corrupt and inept in modern history. This president has repeatedly shown himself to be unwilling to respect the rule of law and to protect civil rights. As an extensive report from the U.S. Civil Rights Commission documented last year, Trump and his appointees have done everything they can to decimate civil and human rights laws. He has put children in cages. He has banned Muslim immigrants because of their religion. He has ended protections for LGBTQ Americans, going so far as to eliminate even the collection of data to ensure that the federal government is serving their needs. He eliminated Biden-Obama rules to safeguard students from being sexually harassed and bullied in schools. He ended Biden-Obama rules to push law enforcement to reform practices that result in the use of excessive force against Blacks and other people of color, and has in fact encouraged border agents and police to use Rambo-like tactics. And he's pushing to end DACA and to end healthcare access and prevent insurance companies from refusing to cover people with pre-existing conditions. He's also nominated candidates for lifetime judicial appointments that have been found to be unqualified by the American Bar Association to serve, and whose records show an antipathy to the rights of women, of people of color, of LGBTQ Americans, and of immigrants. His nominees have been overwhelmingly white and male, and largely from corporate or prosecutorial backgrounds. This is in stark contrast to the work that Vice President Biden, together with President Obama, did in their administration, and what I know President Biden and Vice President Harris will do when they are elected in November. Biden and Obama created the toughest ethics rules in history for their appointees. They appointed people to lead agencies with a lifelong commitment to civil rights. They strengthened rules barring discrimination against people with disabilities in the workplace. They brought in protections for LGBTQ students in schools and serving in the military. And their nominees to the federal courts were the most diverse in history. They nominated more AAPI women and men to the court than all of the previous administrations put together. And the diversity was more than on race and gender. Their judges were former labor lawyers, defense attorneys, and civil rights attorneys. The judges appointed under Biden and Obama are what have been protecting the Constitution and the laws that the Trump administration is breaking now on a daily basis. Judge Dolly G. repeatedly ruled against the government's imprisonment of immigrant children. Judge Theodore Wong and Derek Kahala Watson were among the judges to rule against the early versions of the Muslim ban, forcing the government to narrow it. And Judge Lucy Koh recently issued a temporary restraining order against White House efforts to precipitously cut off the census in order to undercount people of color and exclude immigrants from apportionment and redistricting. Trump and a Republican-controlled Senate would never nominate or confirm a former ACLU attorney like Ginsburg, even one like her who had won 6 out of 7 arguments before the Supreme Court. With Biden as president and Harris as vice president and a Senate led by Democrats, we can expect judges who look like America and who care about civil rights and the rule of law. Judge Ginsburg's work, both on and off the court, opened the doors to equality for women as much as the constitutional amendment we're celebrating, giving women the right to vote. And she inspired many generations of women lawyers like me and our next speaker. It's my honor to introduce Maya Lakshmi Harris. Maya is a nationally influential voice at the intersection of politics, public policy, and civil rights. She directed the Global Democracy, Rights, and Justice program of the Ford Foundation, where I had a chance to see her in action. Before that, she led the ACLU of Northern California, the ACLU's largest affiliate in the United States. Maya authored the groundbreaking report, Women of Color, a growing force in the American electorate. It documented the importance of especially Black women in influencing political outcomes, long before the media and politicians began taking notice. Perhaps as a result of her mom taking her and her sister Kamala to civil rights demonstrations in Berkeley when they were kids, Maya became a lawyer and is a graduate of UC Berkeley and the Stanford Law School. I give you Maya Lakshmi Harris.
Thank you, Karen, for that very, 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 very kind introduction. And I just want everybody on here to know that Karen has been out here fighting for all of us for a very long time. She has been in the trenches and been on the front lines of some of the most important fights that we've had to wage in civil rights for years. So Karen, I just want to thank you not only for the introduction, but also just for everything that you have done in your life to make this a better country and a better world for all of us. And hello to everyone else. I thank you for inviting me to join you. And thank you also for showing up, not just to make history, but literally because we need you to help us save our country and our democracy from 4 more years of failed, incompetent leadership that our communities literally cannot bear. I mean, you know, you saw that more than 200,000 Americans have died of coronavirus, and we have a president who says that this pandemic, quote, affects virtually nobody. So as Karen just described so well, This is such a critical moment in our country. And it is also a really critical moment in the campaign. The election, which it's very hard to believe, is only a few weeks away. And I am telling you that it is going to take all of us, every single one of us, to get this over the finish line. Amit is right. There is no doubt that AAPI voters, that the AAPI community could absolutely make the difference in this election. There is so much power in our community. And if there was ever a time for us to flex that muscle, it is right now, when there is so much that is really on the line. And it's not only all of the bad things that are happening, it's that we absolutely deserve to have leadership in the White House that respects our communities, that will fight for our communities, that actually represents our communities. Not some man who's incompetent and intolerant, who is denigrating our communities and spending full time stirring up hate and division in the country, which is so offensive. And it's also dangerous. And it's obviously completely unacceptable. We deserve so much better. And so we need to harness the power that we all have all across the country, because I know that we can absolutely build the kind of grassroots energy and momentum that we need to actually help Joe and Kamala get into the White House, to elect two people who have devoted their entire lives to public service, to making government work better for all people. And yes, to elect the first ever person of Asian American descent as vice president, the first Black woman, the first Madam Vice President ever in our nation's history, which would be, exciting to say the least, and certainly progress that's long overdue. But let me say this about my sister, about the kind of person that she is. Our earliest lessons in life, and lessons that were learned by example, not history lessons, I mean life lessons, were about equality and fairness and justice, and about the dignity of all people. Karen mentioned our mom, and Kamala and I talk about our mother all the time, and our mother taught us so many things. But among the responsibility and the duty that she instilled in us, and I mean a responsibility and a duty that she instilled in us, she would often tell us, well, a number of things, but a couple of things for tonight's purpose, which is she would tell us, to whom much is given, much is expected. She would say to us that you may be the first to do many things in your life, but you better make sure that you're not the last. And those are the kinds of values, that sense of duty and responsibility is at the core of who Kamala is and who she has always been. It's why she devoted her whole career to fighting for justice, to fighting for truth, to fighting for people who are too often not seen and not heard. It's why we both have devoted our lives literally to the pursuit of justice. She's a true public servant. And the thing that I think is so important is that she and Joe are not just committed to getting us back to some, sense of normalcy and competence, which of course they will, and which of course we need, but they are committed to being better than we were before. It's why they talk about building back better. And the thing that I can assure you is that Kamala and Joe, they see people. It's such a simple thing, but it is not something that we have right now. I mean, they see people, they see people's actual struggles, and they care. They have compassion. I know these sound like such basic things, but they are fundamental to having a government that is going to deliver for people. And importantly, they also have actual plans, unlike the current administration, which is why we need to win this election. And it's going to be on all of us to get this done. Early voting has already started in some places. So right now is the time for us to be doubling and tripling down our efforts. We need to do everything we can do to talk to our communities. And that is going to require us to, in some instances, answer questions and be ready to answer those questions about Joe and Kamala and why they are the best for our community and our country, to sometimes persuade people who may be undecided, to make sure all of our folks are registered to vote, that they actually have a plan to vote. So we are definitely hoping that you're going to join the phone banks after this call. If you haven't done it already, it would also be great if you could text AAPI to 30330, AAPI to 30330, because that'll be a good way for you to stay connected and stay informed about what else you can do to help out. And I guess I want to add one last thing before I wrap up and turn it over to our next very esteemed guest. And it's referring back to something that Karen talked about, which is this election is about more than just Joe and Kamala. So they're important. They're at the top of the ticket. We have got to get them elected. But we've also got to campaign and support and vote up and down the ticket. Not only so that Joe and Kamala have partners to work with in Congress, people who, they'll be able to work with things like, as Karen talked about, judges, people who they'll be able to work with on some of the other critical issues that we need in Congress, but also because so many of the issues that impact our communities are playing out at the state and local level as well. And I'm going to give you just one example, and that's healthcare. The current case that's in the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, to overturn the Affordable Care Act and its protections for people with pre-existing conditions, because by the way, if you don't know this, the Trump administration right now is in the Supreme Court trying to overturn the Affordable Care Act and its protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Well, that case was brought by Republican state officials. And it's Republican governors who have refused to expand Medicaid at the state level and left people uninsured in their states. And it's Republicans in Congress who want to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a woman who was a champion for women, for immigrants, for LGBTQ people, and so much more. And I know you're going to hear more about her later. But someone who also voted to uphold the Affordable Care Act in a previous case. Republicans want to replace her with someone who will undoubtedly take us backwards in terms of equality and justice and fairness and opportunity. So I really hope that you will not only double and triple down on making your calls for, Joe and Kamala and talking to our community and getting our community out to vote, but make sure that we focus on the other races as well up and down the ticket. It is so, so important that we not stop just at the top of the ticket, because I'm going to tell you that if we all work together, I know we can do this. I know we can get this done. So I thank you for all that you're doing, all that I know that you will do and continue to do over the next 41 days. We have to make every day count, but just know that we're also grateful, and most especially that Joe and Kamala are grateful. So I'm going to turn it over, but let's bring this thing home. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for that, Maya. I really appreciate that. Next, I want to introduce someone that needs no introduction, a member of the community that's done so much for our South Asian community, for the AAPI community in California, who's a member of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. With that, I want to introduce Congressman Ro Khanna.
Thank you, Amit, and thank you for all that you've been doing. You've been doing a phenomenal job for Vice President Biden and Senator Harris. And what an honor to follow Maya Harris, who I've admired for so many years, not just as a renowned policy expert and a civil rights advocate, but, someone told me that the secret to Kamala Harris's career is that everyone can see a part of their story in her. And certainly my brother and I can. We're both lawyers. We both went into public service in different ways. And so the fact that Kamala Harris and Maya Harris were trailblazers years before it was even possible for South Asians to think of being lawyers means a lot. And it's frankly, I was talking to my mother, and it's, she almost had tears in her eyes when Kamala Harris was named, in a similar way as when Barack Obama became president, because when she came to this country with my father in the 1970s, it was unimaginable that a South Asian, African-American woman would head the ticket. I want to say what is at stake for a community, but I want to make one very simple point, building on what Maya Harris did. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden didn't start out dreaming to run for president or vice president. They started out like most people on this call. I mean, Kamala Harris was a assistant district attorney for 10 years, slogging and doing public service. Joe Biden, people don't know this. They think, oh, he ran for Senate. He was on the city council in Delaware, serving his community. It would be unthinkable for a Asian American to get up, never having served before, never having been in public office, and to say, you know, I'm a billionaire, I'm going to go run for president of the United States. Of all the things that are offensive about Donald Trump, and there are a lot, one of the things I find most offensive is this conceit that never having done public service, not having even been on a local board, never having worked for a public defender or prosecuting office, never having done an ounce of public service, he suddenly thinks that he is capable and qualified to lead the world's greatest democracy. I mean, the results, the awful results are partly because he never had to participate in the democratic process. Now, I know that our Asian American community can make a difference in the battleground states. And I know this because of my own lived experience. I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. My parents are still there. There are a large auntie network there that they're all talking to. Let me tell you, those aunties come out and they tell their friends, that's going to help Bucks County. We win Bucks County, we probably win Pennsylvania. And I know, just like my story in my family in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, there are families in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Ohio, in Florida. Don't let folks think that the AAPI community is just California or Texas or New York. We are critical in those swing districts, and we have to do everything possible for this election. As Maya said, healthcare is at stake. That's what this Supreme Court fight's about. Are we going to protect people having insurance, or are they not going to have insurance if they have pre-existing conditions? The immigration is at stake. Are we going to make sure, you know, the biggest issues often I get in my office is even with coronavirus, people aren't able they're afraid of, if they're on student visas or on green cards, that they're going to be deported. Are we going to continue to live in that climate of fear? Are we going to have a rational immigration policy? Are we going to have some protection for the dreamers? Are we going to have some sense where people are going to be able to serve regardless of their faith, regardless of their background, and have a diverse administration again? Are we going to have relief for student loans? Are we going to have relief for small businesses? That is what is at stake. I know we can do this. Our democracy is at stake. You know, we don't win this election and it's going to set our nation back probably decades. If we win this election, then we build on what Barack Obama did. We take the step to becoming a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. There is no excuse. People know I was a co-chair for Bernie Sanders' campaign. Let me tell you something. Bernie is 120% in on this election. Every progressive is in. He is fighting harder for this election, I've seen, than he did even in his own primary. This is life or death for our movement, and we have to do everything possible, all of us in our call, to make this happen. Please continue to work as hard as you can. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for your energy in joining tonight.
Thank you so much for that, Congressman Khanna. We really appreciate that. Next, I would like to introduce Michael Wand. Michael is an attorney and partner at his law firm, where he's a member of the firm's National Securities Enforcement, White Collar Defense, and Investigations in Privacy, Cybersecurity, and Consumer Protection practice groups. He has garnered numerous state and national honors, and he was also a former clerk for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Please help us in welcoming Michael Wand.
Thanks so much, and it's great to be here, but it's been a tough day for all of us this morning. I think a lot of you saw the photos and video of I and numerous other clerks for Justice Ginsburg standing outside as the hearse containing her casket appeared, and it was a tough moment for all of us, a tough moment for this country. And there's a Supreme Court tradition I didn't know about until recently, which is that all the law clerks sort of stand vigil at their boss's casket. So I took my turn this afternoon. While I was standing there, I saw Congressman Khanna, to the point you're making, I saw actually Bernie Sanders and Chuck Schumer come by pay their respects. So that was a moving moment, and it was an honor to be standing there. And it is an honor to appear here and to have clerked for her. So I just wanted to tell everybody some of my experiences clerking for Justice Ginsburg, and then my relationship with her in the years afterwards, just so everyone gets a sense of who she really was as a person beyond the Supreme Court opinions, beyond all the achievements that you read about. She was, I think, just a really caring and decent person, and I think the media portrayals of her, I think, are amusing to her because they portray her as notorious and a superhero. And to us, she was, but she was also very humble and cared deeply about people, cared deeply about society and about her law clerks. And she viewed a clerkship as sort of almost like an education for her clerks. Before becoming a judge and a Supreme Court advocate, she was a full-time law professor, and she remained sort of a teacher at her core her entire career. During the clerkship, there was a lot of work to be done, to be sure, and we worked very hard on opinions, late at night, draft after draft, and she set the bar high for putting out insanely and perfect work product. But she always took time to play as well. For everyone's birthday, she had a birthday party. Her husband Marty would bake a cake, and she always would give a special gift to the birthday person. I'd never been to an opera until I clerked for her, and she took us to several operas and loved talking about them and talking about the meaning of the arias. After the clerkship was over, she still kept in touch with all her. No, she kept in touch with me. Sent a custom-made gift for my wedding. Every time she was in San Francisco, she would send a note and invite all her local clerks for dinner, and then a special seat to whatever event she was speaking at. And then when my first son was born, she wrote him a handwritten note welcoming him to the world and gave him another special gift that I'd like you all to see. So this is my son, Caleb, and this was the t-shirt that she had custom printed for the children of her law clerks. It's the Supreme Court logo, and it says RBG Grand Clerk. And I think that speaks volumes about the sort of caring person that she was, that as busy as she was, she would take the time to custom print gifts for the children of her extended family, welcoming them to the world. And with respect to her judicial legacy, I think Meyer earlier talked about Joe Biden and her sister Kamala really seeing people for who they are. And I think at the end, that's what Justice Ginsburg stood for. She stood for seeing people being seen and recognized for who they are, and not being reduced to invidious stereotypes based on immutable characteristics like gender and other characteristics that promote sort of caricatured views of people. When the Equal Protection Clause has the word equal, Justice Ginsburg espoused the view that equal really does mean equal. She left a tremendous legacy and lived a life of caring and decency and hard work. And it's really bittersweet to be back here in DC to serve her one more time and say goodbye to her. And I think that having great justices on the Supreme Court and justices who believe that equal actually means equal is something that we should all think about as we approach the next 30, 40 days. Thanks for having me on, and keep up the good work, everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Michael. We really appreciate that. And I think again, this really shows what's at stake come this November, and what elections really have consequences, and what that means for our nation moving forward. So again, we feel that the AAPI community really can be the margin of victory come this November. But we can only do that if we get to work, if we're bringing along our family, our friends, everyone that we know. And that's why this program every Wednesday is so important, especially hearing from so many great people, but afterwards also phone banking and making everything that the speakers before us and making history a reality. So please join us after this call, after this program. We're going to be doing phone banks across the country, in general AAPI, but also disaggregated phone banks in language. So everything from Korean to Tagalog, to Gujarati, Hindi, Urdu, anything you can think of. So please join us. We're going to share a slide right after this program ends, where you can go and start phone banking. You also received individual links via your confirmation email, so please look out for that as well. Please also, as Maya and others have mentioned, if you haven't already, please join AAPIs for Biden. You can easily do that by going to your phone and texting AAPI to 30330. Again, that's AAPI to 30330. You can also go on our website at aapisforjoe.com to also sign up. And please, next Wednesday, we would love for you to bring 3 of your family, 3 of your friends, relatives, anyone you know, to also join this program and help us phone bank afterwards. So thank you so much for all that you're doing. There's a lot of work to be left to be done in the next 41 days, but with your help, we can do it. So thank you so much and have a good night.